Welcome to this episode of O365Eh, and on tonight's episode, we're going to be talking about Teams Room Pro Management. So this is something that you may have today and you don't even realize it. I'll kick it off just by saying that there was a pretty big licensing change, and Michael, you could talk to this, where there's a basic license that's included for your Teams Room management. And it is basic in that it has a maximum of up to 25 devices, room devices, and it has just the basic capabilities for managing those Teams Room systems. There used to be a Teams Room standard license, which you can no longer get. That's functionalities rolled into the Microsoft Teams Rooms Pro license. And I think the free one is good for getting started. But you'll quickly hit some limitations, especially if you have many room system devices. And also, we were talking just before this episode that, for example, from a security perspective, it doesn't include Azure P1 and P2, so you can't exclude those from MFA, and you can't do conditional access. So you'd really want that from a security perspective. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Michael, just to discuss some other benefits of the Pro license and why people would want to have that.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to just not talk about the basic license. I feel like some of the items that you highlighted are limiting in the fact that it doesn't make sense from a budgeting for an organization to even start down that path. Especially, with these rooms, we need to exclude them from MFA. And if your organization is using conditional access for anything else, we automatically need that P1 license. All other things is, some of the features are limited. So, ability to remotely manage these devices, intelligent speakers and stuff like that are not available in the basic license. So if you're deploying Microsoft Teams Room, I would just base it around having that Pro license. And the benefit of that Pro license is we do have this portal, the Microsoft Teams Room Pro portal that we'll be showing off in this call. And maybe with that, maybe I'll talk to or let Dino cover how we get into this portal, and then we'll walk into a demo.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So the URL for the portal is https://portal.rooms.microsoft.com, and most listeners, if you're listening, you'll probably just dive in and go right to that URL. You'll need to be a global admin to access it, and more importantly, you'll have to have a license as well. So you may get the message you don't have access to this application, even if you are a global admin, and that's generally due to the fact that you don't have any Pro licenses in your tenant. So assuming you have Pro license assigned and available in your tenant, and you're a global admin, you can come up and get access to that portal. So interestingly, there's no Teams in the URL, which is kind of confusing. Hopefully they maybe adjust that at some point, but it does label it the Microsoft Teams Room Pro Management site. So it's one of the first admin sites not to have Teams in there. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And just quickly, and I'll pass it back over to Michael, like the three key aspects of this service is really, what Microsoft calls intelligent operations, update management, and enhanced insights. So really just being able to detect problems with the rooms, connectivity into the rooms to see what's going on if a cable's unplugged. Then moving into management of the devices themselves, allowing you to orchestrate how you want to be able to control how devices are updated, creating kind of your own deployment rings. And then lastly, there's a whole bunch of reporting, and that's the enhanced insights. So giving you details around how the devices are performing, how the rooms are being used, that type of rich analytics. So kind of with that, I'll pass it back over to Michael, and we'll dive into a bit of the demo.
Yeah, and I find customers that have the new licensing scheme, they're not aware of what the URL is, right? Like you may have mentioned this, but it's not available in the Teams Admin Center. It isn't like a link that you can click off at this point. Hopefully they add it, like similar to the call quality dashboard, where it'll link off to another page, or like the Microsoft 365 Admin Centers, when you could jump to the other portals right from the navigation. So you do need to know this URL, and so it is portals.room or portal rooms.microsoft.com, and so it is a little hard to find it. But yeah, if you have the licensing, you can go to it. Once you activate it, there is a little survey when you first go to it to activate it. After that, any of your Microsoft Teams rooms based on Android are now auto-enrolling. If you are running a Windows Microsoft Teams room, there is an agent that you need to install. So that means you're going to have to go to the device, sign in with the admin account, pull the MSI installer, run that, and then the room will show up in this portal. We should see that automatically happening in the future, but this time you do have to install that MSI. You can find that MSI if you go under Settings and under General. You can download it right here. It's an AKA link, so aka.ms/service portal agent MSI. So you can push it through Intune as well. So if you have a whole bunch of rooms that you just changed your licensing from, you can package that agent up and push it to your rooms. It doesn't auto-enroll the rooms. So what will happen is the rooms will get the agent. The rooms will detect based on the tenant that signed in. It'll show up in your portal. When you go under rooms, you're going to see them listed, and then you're going to have to take that extra step. And of course, I clicked an Android room. But if I grab a Windows room, what you'll see at the bottom is enroll. Once you enroll it, then you can start dealing with the update rings and delegated administrative access and stuff like that. So there is some interesting things with this being a separate portal from the Teams Admin Center, is that now you can have your audiovisual installer have access to this portal to manage the devices without having administrative rights to your collaboration and your voice settings of the house. So you can now create different roles and scope them down to certain devices, and then create those roles using security groups in Azure AD.
And Michael, did you have to do anything to activate that portal, like in terms of the first time you run it?
Yeah, as Dino mentioned, we have to have at least a Pro Portal license in the tenant, and then you have to come in as global admin. Once you come in as global admin, you can go into this roles section. There's some pre-canned roles. You can create some additional roles. And then those roles, if you kind of go under assignments, you can assign them by named users, or you can do Azure, AD security groups, and then have that kind of sync into it. But yeah, the first person come in here should be the global admin. There also is a feature called groups. And this group section allows you to then group your devices. So let me kind of jump out of here. But if I go under a device, so maybe I'll just grab a room. So I can assign a room to, or a device to a group, and then I can layer an administration role on top of that. So now I can say, hey, you know what? The Calgary admin group can only manage the Calgary enrolled rooms. Now you have to think about your permissions, because if you're having someone install rooms, until they enroll and get that group assignment, if the only role they have is managing rooms in that group, then they can't see the rooms that they just enrolled. So there is a chicken and egg for some of the things, depending on what you're doing. But it is important to understand, are you going to do any integrations? Because the groups do matter, because you may want to structure the naming convention to align with other systems.
So Michael, I see like there's a ServiceNow, I guess on the left-hand rail. So I'm assuming this is a way to integrate with ServiceNow to create ticket, from the portal or vice versa. Can you maybe just explain a little bit about that? And then, are there any other type of integrations? Like, is there Graph API access so that you can do your own type of, development to access this portal, and any other specific functionality?
Yeah, I mean, out of the box, you can easily set up email alerting. So the portal does detect when there's a health issue with the device, or maybe your device isn't meeting certain best practices. Like, hey, you deployed a Microsoft Teams room, but you left the default SFB password, or password for the admin account on there. So it'll flag those things and send out an email ticket. So you can easily, under the general settings, set up a contact for sending out those alerts. But if we want to do ServiceNow integration, so this is one of the kind of integrations that are out of the box. You would have to work with, obviously, your ServiceNow team to understand how tickets should be created and closed in that system. most of the time I see organizations want to do OAuth support for ServiceNow. So don't even go down the basic, use proper authentication mechanisms. So you have an app with a secret and a user account meant for this integration. You're able to, point it to a dev instance and then cut it over to production as you see fit. And the great thing here is it'll test. So what will happen, well, maybe good and bad, is you can populate everything, hit test, and if it's successful, you can save it. If it's not successful, you can't. And so the test will basically try and create a ticket automatically and close the ticket automatically, because the system can say, hey, you know what, this room, the camera is unplugged, or this room's offline. And then when the room is resolved, go in and create that, close that ticket off. So part of the test is testing that integration. Now, there is some caveats with this. So these fields that you see right now on my screen, those are fields that are always going to be sent to your ServiceNow instance. So depending on what you require for mandatory fields, or maybe what you don't require, you need to maybe handle how these settings or these mappings are going to be. So it's almost like a matrix. So what you'll do is you'll see, okay, by default, when a ticket's created in ServiceNow, we're going to send a short description, an assignment group, severity, and comments. And all of these items are grayed out except for the top one. So short description, you can pick from a list. That same list can be leveraged in custom attributes as well, and I'll show that in a second. And for the assignment group, this is tied to your groups that we were talking about before, where you could have a group based on location, and that location can map to the same location that resources are assigned on your ServiceNow system. So as you add groups, you may want to say like Calgary would be the service equivalent of CGY, so you need to make sure that these mappings are the same. When we talk about update rings, the same thing here is you may say you have an update ring for executive devices, and that in return is a higher priority ticket versus a general room or something like that. So you need to have your ServiceNow team on the line of telling you what needs to map and what values you need to send. You also are allowed to do custom attributes. So you may have an attribute for category or something like that. So you can say, maybe this is, I think it's like format of like U category, and then something like main or something like that. And then you can have, those options that we had for the description. So we can do ticket ID, room name, host name, incident information, or you can do custom value. So maybe it is some static entries you just need for this portal to create. So you may call it like MTR portal is creating these tickets or something like that. So you may have to do some ServiceNow mapping or scripting on that side to accept this ticket on how Microsoft's going to send it, and then put it in the right buckets and the right assignments. Same thing on the closing side. What's interesting on the closing side is you can't reference any of the default values. So if I was to add a new entry for, just to grab a good example, maybe a resolution code is already there, maybe, however, resolution. We'll just do U underscore. You can't use any of these values because what we'll do, it will fail. So you could pick like, hey, room name, and then you go to test and it's not going to work. You have to basically use custom value for anything on the resolve. So if you require, no action taken or anything like that, you're going to do those as static entries. So it's maybe not as flexible as what a ServiceNow team may need, but it's enough to get a ticket automatically created when there's a problem, flag the appropriate people, and then have it automatically close when it's resolved.
Awesome.
The other thing I was talking about was the update rings. So on the update rings, we have basically a way of timing out your updates to your different rooms. So you can say, and typically I'll just start with what Microsoft has. There's basically 3 rings already here. So if you have some test devices for IT, maybe you throw them into a staging ring. You have your general population of devices, you put that into general, and then you have your priority rooms, you put that into executive. And the reason why I don't like to create additional ones is there is a hard requirement that from when Microsoft releases an update to completing all the rings is 60 days. And so as you add more stages, you're actually making your your update rings smaller and smaller, which may not make sense. So if you say, hey, you know what, we test with our IT for 2 weeks, and then we test, and well, we don't test, we roll out to production for maybe 2 weeks, another 2 weeks or 1 week, and then we roll out to our executive devices maybe 3 or 4 weeks later. Well, if you add another ring, then you're quickly hitting that 60-day timeout. And so what will happen is we kind of go into these rings. There's basically 3 values that you can manipulate. You can manipulate, and one of them's calculated. So you can manipulate the value of how long from when an update is released to when it hits this ring. So by default, staging would be 0 days, general's 12 days, and then executive, I think, is after general. And then you can say, how long is it going to roll out in this ring? And then how long are you going to have it testing in this ring? So rollout is like how long it kind of takes to hit every device in that ring. And then testing is kind of that buffer before going to the next ring. And so as you manipulate these numbers, you can quickly hit 60 if you have a lot of rings. So, but yeah, you can start to now control when our update's coming. We want to see them at IT first before they get to all our rooms overnight, which was the previous experience with the Microsoft Teams room for Windows. So when we have our rooms, basically you can see the dashboard. Is there any issues with the rooms? It'll automatically create tickets. And in this case, I have an incident. If I had ServiceNow integration, I'll actually have the ServiceNow ticket and a link to click it into the ServiceNow portal. And the ServiceNow portal ticket will have a link back to this portal to jump back and forth. So it does have a nice integration from that point of view. It'll basically tell you what's wrong, why it's wrong, and how to correct it. So in my case, I have a room that's still using the default admin credentials. Once that's resolved, that item will close out.
Hey, Michael, did you? Oh yeah, I think you're just headed there. Just wanted to see what the reports looked like.
Yeah, so kind of in addition from what we may have had in the Teams admin center is we start to get health and usage. So what are your rooms that are maybe the most stable versus the least stable? Maybe there's a combination of peripherals and hardware manufacturers or vendor revisions or versions that are causing some instability. Well, now you can look at your rooms that are the most stable and make sure you deploy more rooms like that. The rooms that are maybe not stable, see what's common between them and what incidents are outstanding. What maybe it's a firmware update, maybe it's contacting one of the device manufacturers or getting updated drivers. But then also usage. So as your rooms are being consumed, how are they heavily overutilized? Maybe it's a large room with low quantity of participants. Maybe you need to split that room out to get more rooms for booking. So it's early in the journey for all these features, but this was the premium portal before. So now we get to kind of consume that as any Microsoft Teams room kind of administrator.
Good stuff. And I think, Michael, you've used this on a couple of customer sites. Any highlights that have stuck out in your sort of real world experience of it?
Yeah, I mean, right now, a lot of organizations are planning around the license change. So, hey, we had a whole bunch of Teams room standard licensing. We're coming up for renewal, or we're putting a whole bunch more rooms in there. Is it time now to flip over to the pro licensing? That's the first step. How do we flip the licenses over? From there is how do we get the rooms enrolled in the portal? Get that agent out. Is it push through into an SCCM? Is it manually installed? Once those rooms are in the portal, now we have to think about, how are we going to manage these? Are we going to delegate? Are we going to have, RBAC, for who's going to be managing these rooms? Is that based on location? Is that based on role? Are we going to be doing integration with ServiceNow, and how does that correlate? Mapping all those attributes, that may change how you build your rings in your groups. So understanding that all up front before you kind of start putting all your rooms in, because the last thing you want to do is start pushing updates to all your executive rooms before you're ready to kind of define everything.
Yeah, I could see how this is really beneficial for larger deployments. Like,
before you couldn't. Updates were happening automatically. At 2 a.m. restart every night. Your next day, your rooms could be a different experience, right? So having that admin control of when updates are applying to your different stages or rings. It's great.
Awesome. Okay, well, we'll leave it there. That was a really good overview of the Teams Rooms Pro Management experience in the portal. Thank you very much, Michael. And with that, we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks.
Okay.